On the night of June 13, 2025, more than 200 Israeli fighter jets carried out several hundred missile strikes in 5 waves on dozens of targets across Iran. Before this, Mossad carried out a multi-stage intelligence and sabotage operation. Small drones hit air defense systems, missile depots, and other important targets. Israel reports complete dominance over the enemy. However, Iran strikes back hard, and even the highly praised Iron Dome and other Israeli missile defense systems cannot cope with all the hundreds of ballistic missiles fired by the Iranians. There is a lot of destruction and human casualties. Looking at all of this, it's hard to believe that just 50 years ago Israel and Iran were almost the main allies in the region. So what went wrong? The creation of Israel as a country in the middle of the Arab world was celebrated by very few locals. Immediately after the UN resolution in 1947 to partition Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states, war broke out between the sides. When Israel declared independence on May 14, 1948, Egyptian planes bombed Tel Aviv the very next day. The invasion was launched by a coalition of Arab countries, including Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, but not Iran. Israel won that war, as well as several subsequent ones, essentially defending its right to exist each time. One way or another, the Israelis gradually began building diplomatic relations, and whether you believe it or not, Iran was almost Israel's closest partner in the Middle East. The countries maintained trade ties. Israel helped Iran develop its infrastructure and, importantly, its air defense and missile development programs. They even exchanged intelligence. The thing is, after World War II, Iran, while still a monarchy, became very Western-oriented under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This is what the Iranians looked like in the 70s of the last century. However, among the Islamic population, there were many who were dissatisfied with the westernization of the country. When women gained divorce and child rights, unrest spread nationwide. It wasn't the only reason, of course, but it was a key one. If you want a more detailed video about the Islamic Revolution, let us know in the comments. Let's note that Shah Pahlavi suddenly took off on an overseas vacation, and decided not to return. Meanwhile, the previously exiled Ayatollah Ruhollah Mousavi Khomeini returned to Iran and became the first supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iranians never dressed like that anymore. Almost on his first day in power, Khomeini dubbed the United States the Great Satan and Israel the Little Satan. The destruction of Israel literally became Iran's national policy. This marked the beginning of a nearly 50-year-long conflict that may now be reaching its peak before our eyes. Interestingly, despite everything, in the 1980s Israel even provided some limited aid to Iran in its war against Iraq, considering Iraq the greater threat. Since the early 90s, Khomeini and his circle could completely disregard concerns like providing a decent standard of living for Iranians and focus entirely on the war with Israel. At that time it was shadowy. It was then that Iran began actively supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. The Jews directly clashed with the latter in 2006, when Hezbollah launched an attack in northern Israel, killing 3 and capturing 2 soldiers. In response, the Israelis launched a full-scale operation, bombing Lebanon's main roads, bridges, and airports. Many strikes were also carried out on residential areas aimed at eliminating Hezbollah leaders. The latter instead launched missile strikes on Israel. The official Lebanese government and army distanced themselves from the conflict. As a result of the war, over 1,200 Lebanese, 119 soldiers and 44 Israeli civilians were killed. Lebanon's economic damage exceeded $6 billion. However, Hezbollah's popularity, backed by Iran, actually increased in the country. Another arena for confrontation between Israel and Iran was Syria, where a civil war broke out in 2011. Iran has strengthened its military presence in Syria, supporting Bashar al-Assad's regime and deploying its forces there, along with Hezbollah militants. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, especially its elite unit, the Quds Force, provided military, intelligence and material support to the Syrian government forces. Israel carried out hundreds of strikes on IRGC targets, weapon depots, airfields, and Hezbollah convoys. However, the Israelis unofficially coordinated their actions with Russia, which supported al-Assad. But both sides did not want even an accidental collision with each other. The turning point of the shadow war that set off the chain of events leading the Middle East to its current state was October 7, 2023. Another Iranian satellite, Hamas, carried out the largest attack on Israel since the country's founding. Hamas fired over 3,000 missiles in a few hours, covering a ground attack. About 2,000 Hamas militants simultaneously broke through the Israeli barrier along the Gaza Strip at more than 30 points. They used explosives, bulldozers, powered hang gliders, motorcycles, pickups, and even parachutes. About 1,200 Israeli civilians were killed in the attack. 251 people were kidnapped. In response, Israel launched a large-scale military campaign against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, which is still ongoing. In Gaza, it is claimed that Israeli strikes have already killed 55,000 people. In April 2024, Israel launched an airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And in less than 2 weeks, for the first time in history, Iran launched a direct strike on Israel, taking the shadow war to a new level. Most of the hundreds of drones and missiles launched by the Iranians were intercepted by Israel's and its allies' air defense systems. Even then, the whole world held its breath, awaiting a full-scale war in the region. However, in the fall, Israel limited its response to an airstrike on Iranian military and possibly nuclear sites in retaliation for the April attack. But the rhetoric of Israel's current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, left no doubt that he is unlikely to stop. On top of that, at home Netanyahu was blamed for missing the Hamas invasion, and he also faces corruption charges. So continuing the war is a good way for Bibi to stay in power, and possibly stay free. No matter the behind-the-scenes political games, the fact remains unchanged. Iran poses an existential threat to Israel, having made it literally its state policy. So Netanyahu did issue the order for the attack on June 13, 2025. Despite the elimination of the top Iranian military leadership and successful airstrikes on military targets, Iran's current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is still alive. He declares the country's intention to fight for as long as necessary and has even chosen successors just in case. Moreover, Israel did not have weapons powerful enough to reach Iran's key nuclear facilities, located tens of meters deep under mountain rock. Netanyahu made a very risky bet that Donald Trump, completely unpredictable but eager for some victories since the start of his new term, would join the operation. And to Bibi's credit, he wasn't wrong. On June 22, American B-2 Spirit bombers from a base in Missouri dropped 14 bombs, each weighing over 13 tons, on 3 of Iran's nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Trump and his team, of course, immediately reported on the complete destruction of Iran's nuclear program. Satellite images also confirmed that the bombs were dropped accurately enough. The New York Times, however, reports that key equipment and even enriched uranium were removed from the sites before the strike. Anyway, Trump still got a chance to shout to the world about his peacemaking greatness. Israel and Iran agreed to a ceasefire, broke it almost immediately, but eventually halted the fighting. No matter how long the relative quiet lasts, days, weeks, or months, it changes nothing. The policy of the Iranian regime, with the destruction of Israel at its very core, hasn't changed. If there's anything left of the nuclear program, Iran will undoubtedly continue its work in that direction, as well as its support for Hamas and Hezbollah. So no matter how proud the Americans are of their bombing peacekeeping, the confrontation between Israel and Iran, which began in 1979, is unlikely to end anytime soon.